When we introduce you, obviously you would unmute yourself and start talking, and you'll come to centre stage.
Yes, Genene. Well, look at all the lovely ladies and then me on the screen. Oh, dear me, this always amuses me. But anyway, firstly, thank you for being here. This is being recorded. You will get the chopped up version of your segment of you speaking, so you will have that asset for your own social media to pump out after. The lovely Genene is looking after that. Disclaimer, I can just about set up a Zoom link. Sarah and Amanda and people like that know this. So it's lucky that I'm actually even on. Lucky for me. So International Women's Day is a really, really important day of the year for me. But every day I like to celebrate the woman in my life and the females in my life, not just today. You know, I think today is really good to highlight a lot of certain points that will get a lot of headlines, but for me, it's every day, every damn day I do this here, and I champion female empowerment far and wide. A lot of females have been major influences in my life, major influences. People that are close to me that would mentor and coach me, and I truly appreciate that. Interestingly, what I learned last International Women's Day of all days, and I said this to Rachel, I was talking to Rachel yesterday, lovely Rachel on her screen. What I learned last International Women's Day, and I was co-hosting a big event here in Northern Ireland. I was getting, a lot of people were saying to me, you're this male feminist. I hadn't even heard that term before, by the way, but this is what people were throwing at me when they see me online talking about female empowerment. And what I actually learned that day was this, when I was actually hosting the event, there was women around the world on it, was that I wasn't a male feminist. Shock, horror, don't, everybody in the chat box, bad man, get off the screen. No, bear with me. I'm actually a humanitarian at heart. I believe in us together, you know, not gender specific, not woman, male, you know what I mean? And I'm really passionate about that. But I do recognize a lot of inequality and a lot of conversations that need to happen and so on and so forth, which is why I'm here and why I champion this. So that's who I am. I'm founder of Think Network. I'm a TED creator, speaker, blah, blah, blah. I might have told a couple of people about that once upon a time. Check my social media. And Genene is my lovely host.
Thank you, Gary. So look, what I loved about what you just said, Gary, is, and it just confirms why I really like you. You know, you're a great character and a great connector, but the humanity. So I'm eminently interested in the human condition, and I just love people. So, you know, that's my perspective on the world. Obviously, I'm a financial advisor, and I spend most of my days talking about, you know, biases when it comes to money and how we can fix those. But at the end of the day, today is really about the Break the Bias campaign, and there's so many different biases. And I like to imagine a world where gender is equal. I imagine a world that's free of biases and stereotypes and discrimination, and a world that's diverse and equitable, inclusive and fair. And so I want to put this event on with Gary today, really to bring forward some of the wonderful women that are in our networks, and we value them and their contributions to this evening. So welcome and thank you. I want to see a world where difference is really valued and celebrated, and together we can forge equity for women. Now, I'm going to say it, I said it earlier before we came online, this isn't about man bashing, you know, it's not about that. It is really about understanding what biases exist and that there is substantial gaps between the lot of women versus the lot of men. And so I'd like to just put that forward as being collectively we can break the bias. And to me, this is just one step forward in being more human, if that's possible. All right, so I'm just going to Hand back to Gary. Any closing comments before we get started, Gary?
None for me. None for me. I talk too much anyway. So it's one of my favorite things to do. But I actually was on a call with a guy just before this here, and we talked about having 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we talk. So I'm going to listen twice as much as I talk today. Sarah will be proud of me because that's her space. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to be listening intently. I'm going to be learning. I'm going to be a sponge for information. And truly and honestly, it's a real honor for me, all joking aside, it is a real honor for me to be connected with all you ladies, because every day is a learning day for me, and this is personal development for me. I'm going to learn more today than I knew before I come on this call, and I'll be a better man, and I'll be a better father, and I'll be a better husband, and I'll be a better son, and I'll be a better citizen for it. And I will pass that on to other men in my network. And there's a lot of good people out there that perhaps just need educated more. I think education's a big thing. I think getting people, educate and empower people to be the best versions of themselves. So that's what I will be taking away from today, and I look forward to learning more.
Thanks, Gary. So together we will help forge a gender equal world. And I have just noticed that Jody hasn't joined us as yet. So Laura, are you there? Oh, here you are. Good.
Yes. I see Laura.
I see you, Laura. So look, let me introduce Laura. So Laura Piccardi is a stress management expert, communication coach and speaker, and author of the best-selling book, Unfaked. If you haven't read Laura's book, I suggest you do. I think for me, it is the best cover layout I've ever seen. I love it. I'm going to steal it for one of my own books, Laura. I hope you don't mind. Just putting it out there. She specialises in teaching business leaders how to think and behave and communicate differently so that they can live truly successful and fulfilled lives and have a bloody good time in the process. And so couldn't agree, that's so important, Laura. Laura says, if you truly want to break the bias and achieve everything we know we're capable of, we must first break the bias within ourselves. So let's welcome Laura now as she talks about how to be free from internal bias so you can have the confidence to drive for whatever it is that you really want in life and effectively manage whatever comes your way and inspire change around you. Laura, over to you.
Thank you very much for that lovely intro. So, excuse me, I am indeed Laura Piccardi. I am totally winging it. I'm useless and I look fat in this outfit. Of course, I'm not those things, although it is true that the camera does add a few kilos. I'm definitely a size 8, by the way. No, I am not any of those things. However, that's what my brain would have me believe if I let it. So I'm talking here about my inner critic. I'm sure you all are way familiar with what that is. I like to liken the inner critic to your drunk uncle at a wedding. You know, the one who's always lurking in the background and has this remarkable ability to just pop up at inappropriate times and say something with the sole purpose of making you feel small and insignificant. Am I right? Well, this evening, in 10 minutes, I am going to show you how to pop that uncle in a taxi and send him off to the kebab shop where he can sober up and think about what he's done. So we are indeed talking about confidence, about hashtag breaking the bias within ourselves, because I believe that at the center of breaking the bias within communities is confidence, personal confidence within ourselves. Because as Genene said when she introed me, once we have that confidence, we're able to drive and fight for what we want. We're able to speak up when something's not right, and we're able to inspire change around us. So today, this evening, this morning, wherever the heck you all are, I'm just going to focus in on one thing, one key element to creating this confidence and breaking inner bias and sending that inner critic on its way. So I want to focus on how our physiology, how the way we think can drive our physiology, and how that physiology then drives the way we think, and then how we can change the way we think to drive our physiology. So very simple. Now, to start, I want to do a little activity so we can just understand what I'm talking about in terms of physiology. So I know we have a good audience on here, so I have the power to select a few of you in the audience, and I'm going to get you to jump on live. I want you to introduce yourself to everyone here throughout the world and share one thing with us that no one knows about you. So I'm just going to quickly figure out the tech. So have a little think about what you might say, just in case I pick on you. I'm only joking. I'm not actually going to do that. But what I do want you to do is just check in for a moment and see how you're feeling. I suspect your heart rate is incredibly high, your thoughts are in overdrive, and you're probably in a general state of panic, right? So now I want you to count backwards from 100 in increments of 7 as quickly as you can. Go. Increments of 7, go, 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 go. Time's running out. And stop wherever you are. How was that? Was it challenging? All right, so I want to now invite you to breathe with me. So we're going to do 3 big diaphragmatic breaths together. So when I say diaphragmatic breaths, I'm talking about filling your entire torso. So from the pit of your belly to the top of your chest, front, side, and back. So as you breathe in, let everything expand. As you breathe out, let everything contract. So 3 of them. Join me now. So we're going to breathe in and out. And again, breathing in and out. Last one. Let's make it count. Breathing in and out. Now I'd like you to count backwards from 100 in increments of 6 as quick as you can. Off you go. Time is a ticking. Okay, and stop wherever you are. So again, I want you to just check in and see how you felt with that. Did you find that it was a little bit easier after you had breathed? Yeah, and you felt like you probably felt like you could do it a bit more easily, right? Even though you might not be good at increments of 6, you probably thought, all right, I can figure this out. Let's just calm down a minute and go with it. Am I right? Any nods from the people I can see? Come on, we got the financial lady here. You should do that in whatever state you're in. Now, the reason that it was more challenging in the first instance was because your physiology was heightened. You were in a state of fight or flight mode because you were in that panic, right? And you got anxious because of something that you were thinking. I didn't actually cause any danger to be present for you, but you started to think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to get on, I might say something stupid, I haven't got my makeup on, my camera's not at the right angle, I haven't got the right lighting, blah, blah, blah. And so your brain thought you were in danger, so it triggered fight or flight mode and you got anxious. Now, when that happens, when you're in fight or flight mode, you're actually operating more from your emotional brain, which is your instinctual brain. So it's the same as the cave people really operated from all of the time. So logic doesn't really come into things when we're in our instinctual brain. So it means that it's much harder for us to make sense of things and to think clearly and to find a clear pathway out of things. And then, of course, when we feel like that, then we start to feel like we're drowning, right? We can't deal with things in life as easily. We can't get perspective on situations. And so that inner critic really comes into play, because that inner critic is actually a strategy devised by our brains to keep us safe. It actually feeds us these thoughts and feeds us these critical behaviors because it wants to hold us back in our comfort zone where it knows what's going to happen, where everything is safe as far as the brain is concerned. However, after we breathed, we actually calmed down our fight or flight mode and we went into what's called rest and digest mode, which is essentially fight or flight mode's much better looking brother. So that was our parasympathetic nervous system, coming out to play. So when we're in that mode, we can actually think more clearly because we're more in our logical brain then. So that's when we can then get perspective on situations, we can find a pathway through, and we can take on challenges more easily. Even if we can't do them, we tend to feel like things are more possible. So we're more able to commit to trying to figure out a solution. So we're in our problem-solving brain, basically. So of course, I'm sure you can appreciate that when we're in this part of our brain, when we feel like things are more possible, when we're able to navigate things more easily, of course, confidence is inevitable. As well, by the way, as all these other added benefits of better well-being, more happiness, more joy, more connection with people. Good things happen when we are operating more from our logical brain and not in this constant state of fight or flight mode. So one of the ways that we can then change the way we think in order to drive our physiology in the way that is helpful for us and the way that gives us confidence is to understand this notion of how our meanings create our feelings. So I want you to understand, I suppose, that nothing physical has the power to make you feel anything emotionally. It's the meaning you give to it that does. So let me give you a little example. So, well, let's take public speaking for an example, since that's what's happening right now. So why is it that I can get up on stage in front of hundreds of people, I can appear on TV, whereas for most people, the idea of getting up in front of even a group of 5 people is terrifying, and they would rather experience a very slow and painful death? Why is that? Because public speaking is actually the same scenario for all of us, but we're giving it a different meaning, so therefore it's producing a different feeling. So I suspect for those who are terrified out there, you might be giving it a meaning of something like, oh my gosh, I might say something stupid, I might forget what I'm going to say, and then everyone's going to think I'm an idiot. That then speaks to the instinctual part of the brain and makes us think that we're going to be rejected and then we're going to die, essentially. Whereas I give it the meaning, you know what, I know my stuff, and I know that if I just step out and deliver and be my authentic self, whatever words need to come are gonna come. And that's why I'm much calmer. I won't say I'm completely calm, I'm human, but I'm able to do things more easily and actually enjoy them. So I want to leave you with that notion this evening and put it to you that the next time you feel something that's undesirable, or you feel something that is preventing you from being yourself or for doing what it is that you want to do, just ask yourself, what meaning am I giving to this situation? Because once you understand that, then you can start changing it. And we can change that just by consistently thinking and doing the new thing that we want to think. Because when we do that, our neural pathways start to form. We start to form new neural pathways, and then that starts to become our natural way of being. But that is far too many things for me to go into in 12 seconds. So I just want to leave you with that. So the way that you think can drive your physiology, and then your physiology can drive the way you think. However, you're able to change the way you think by changing the meanings that you're giving to things, which then in turn will change the feelings that you get, which then in turn and over time will allow more confidence to come out to play, which will then allow you to #break the bias. Mic drop.
Laura, you're awesome. I'm just so happy to have had you on to talk about that. That was so insightful. And just to clear the record, my brain went blank completely when you said count backwards from 100 and lots of 7 or 6. I was like, did I really hear what you just said?
You've got the added pressure of having to perform because you're the numbers lady.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Now, I'm just going to check in with Gary before we let you go. Gary, were there any questions from the panel or audience?
No, just a few comments coming in there. Great info, Laura. Thank you. Great talk. What I wanted to actually feedback was, Laura, do you know what you said there about the public speaking thing? It's actually so true. There is a statistic from the Stanford University that I used in a talk some time ago, that in a research taken by Stanford University, there was something like 70 or 80% would said that they would rather die than public speak.
Yeah,
like, you know,
isn't it?
It's just crazy. Like, and I get it, but like, I was the guy that would never public speak my whole life, didn't want to speak, too shy, was worried about what people thought of my voice, how I sounded, what if I made a mistake, well, how did I look, blah blah blah. But it's one of those things, when you just do, then you're like me, you end up like me, and you can't shut up, you know. but I love people to smash through that barrier, you know, and actually fulfill.
And that's one of the keys, is changing the meanings and knowing your outcome, right? If you've got a greater outcome, like you want to help people, you know, live better lives or have more confidence, break the biases, that helps you smash through your own biases, because you know that you're here for a purpose.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think when you align yourself with your purpose, you can overcome anything. Beck saying there shows how powerful language is. Absolutely. Some of the things that you would say to yourself, you would never dream of saying to somebody else. Not even your worst enemy. I don't encourage you to have any enemies, by the way. Disclaimer. But you know what I mean. The internal dialogue that we use, we should treat ourselves with the love that we want to see in the world, you know. And I don't think enough of us do that enough of the time.
Well, we become what we think, right? And it's absolutely true. So
for sure. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for inviting me to share.
Thanks again, Laura. That was fantastic. I'm just delighted. And as always, you've entertained us with a little bit of humour here and there, which is always wonderful. I think the key message there is just, you know, relax. And if you've got to public speak, for example, or speak about anything at any time, just relax and breathe and, you know, take it on the cuff. Other people don't know what you were planning to say. They don't see the script.
Exactly. And by the way, can I just say, I hope we didn't lose much of the audience when I said I was going to pick on them to come on live, because I did that in a few talks today, and I just watched the numbers plummet when I did it, and I was like, quick, get on to your colleagues and tell them to come back. It was a joke.
But it's interesting you did that, because here's one for you. It wouldn't have bothered me if you had picked me, but here's what I was thinking was, it actually crossed my mind, what if she picks me? You know, in that moment, though, you know, so yeah, totally get it. Genene, am I introducing our next speaker?
Yes, if you could introduce Michelle, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, the lovely Michelle, who is below me on my screen. I don't know where she is on your screen, but she is wearing a lovely red, orange, I don't know, shirt. And Michelle is a lovely, lovely lady who I have had the pleasure of working with on her beautiful TED Talk. And she really is a woman of influence, an identity activator, author, personal brand advisor from Victoria, yes, Victoria in Australia, and we've struck a real good rapport, and a really wonderful lady, and it's a great pleasure to have her here to share her perspective on breaking the bias. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. I really appreciate those words. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start by telling you a story, a once upon a time story, inside the walls of a mid-sized organisation where something very strange occurred. A young woman, let's call her Michaela, applied for a position. She was happy with her performance in the interview and was excited to be told she was one of only 2 on the final shortlist. It was a newly created role, she was told, and neither candidate had the exact experience they were looking for. However, she was unsuccessful. A few months later, Michaela received a call from the manager there to see if she was still available. It seems Mike, the successful applicant, didn't quite have the skill set and was moved across to another position. Could she start as soon as possible? She did. When she landed there, Michaela found herself sharing a 4-desk pod in an open plan office with a mature aged man. Yes, it was Mike. Each had been told the history of the other's appointment. Now, Michaela had an unusual surname and repeatedly found herself spelling it out when giving her contact details. One day after she finished a call, Mike stood up from his desk, leaned over the divider and said loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear, "Have you ever considered changing your name?" Wow, stunned silence. "Why would I do that?" she asked. "Well, to make it easier for others to spell, of course," Mike said. "It's my family name. That's who I am," a shocked Michaela replied. Mike's last word was, "Well, you should have changed it when you married." Now, Michaela was speechless. In that moment, she lost her voice. The exchange minimised and appalled her. Our name is a core marker of our identity. We use it when we meet others for the first time. When we introduce ourselves by name, like we have tonight, we are stating, "This is who I am," so that we can distinguish ourselves from others in the room or on the call. A name is a label, our label. But labels can create bias. We're all raised within a social construct of beliefs. Very early on, we have to navigate the environment and the unspoken message that the best way to fit in is to conform. In order to fit in and have a feeling of belonging in her village, Michaela believed it was necessary for young women to get married and to have kids. But this wasn't to be for her. The label of wife and partner was not her story. This led to her feeling different, unworthy, and a social failure. Identity invites labels, and labels create bias, and bias begins internally. So back to Mike. Was he reacting to Michaela's surname because of some hidden cultural bias? Was he trying to put her down because she now had his job? Was he simply trying to be entertaining? Or was he really just trying to be helpful? Well, of course, we don't know Mike's intention. We only see his behaviour and hear his language. We could pause and ask what's going on for him that caused him to react in this way. What biases did he have? But, you know, this is not about Mike. We'll never know his story. This is about Michaela. Her response to Mike that day came from a deeper place than simply thinking his comments were inappropriate and outdated. She had an internal bias too, and it was a self-assumed bias. She had worn it like a pair of comfortable shoes for so long that she didn't want to change. Her bias was so strong, she used it to justify her judgment of others. Those shoes were comfortable, but they caused her to trip over. They had holes in them and were not serving her at all. When Michaela put them on, it made others feel uncomfortable. It created a barrier to her building trust and understanding. Her self-assumed bias was the belief that others judged her and thought less of her because she'd never married and didn't have children. She would default to it without thought or deliberation, in the same way she dragged out the comfortable shoes to wear. It had become a habit. Mike had unknowingly triggered something emotional, so deep that even she wasn't aware. Her bias was hidden. It was a source of deep pain. It was secret, and it was self-imposed. It got in the way of her confidence, self-belief, and self-acceptance. It drove her to constantly seek validation in relationships and at work, where she hid behind her professional identity. She looked for evidence of judgment from others, but this self-imposed bias held her back from truly unleashing her magic. Mike's comments that day weren't enough for Michaela to throw the old shoes away. In fact, It was to be another 25 years of pain and discomfort before that would happen. So I invite you to take a closer look at bias. The word suggests a predisposition or a preconceived notion of someone or something. In the same way, we may have a preference for certain ways of being. For example, I have a preference for working with ideas, themes and patterns over spreadsheets, Genene, data and systems. I'd give you a sketchbook before a blueprint. That's my bias. It's neither right nor wrong. It's simply my preference. So was Michaela's self-imposed bias a preference? No, it was not. Was it based on a predisposition to be single? Possibly. Was it a preconceived notion that not having kids was the way she would live her life for reasons she did not understand? Yes, it was. Now, since that day with Mike, she's uncovered her self-assumed bias. After a sequence of heartbreaking events, the pain from the shoes finally became too much. Her life unravelled, her identity was challenged, and she no longer knew who she was. She knew she was in trouble and had to take action. What did she do? What would you do? Michaela was by nature curious and a seeker of knowledge. This led her to discover the work being done in the field of epigenetics, genetic imprinting, and inherited family trauma. She became a detective of her own family system and the language of her own inner narrative. By revealing and facing into the layers of generational trauma, Michaela found the answers and a possible explanation for her life choices and decisions. This new perspective released her story and her bias was broken. She found her voice and now notices her language and posture has changed. Her identity has evolved, releasing her magic, and she hopes to inspire others to go on a similar journey of self-discovery. So whether it be as simple as our name, age, status, these are all identity labels. They may trigger a bias response in another, and whilst they're useful in helping us differentiate ourselves, they can be unhelpful barriers to mutual respect and shared understanding. In digging deeper, we're able to slowly diffuse the power and make room for new shoes that'll fit us better. And it'll encourage others to be curious about where we found them. Oh my goodness, they look so comfortable. Where did you find them? Can we talk about them? Finally, when we change our language, I believe we can change the conversation. When we change the conversation, we can change the engagement. When we change the engagement, we can change behaviour. To be part of a bigger change, which I want to be, we start by breaking our own self-assumed bias, because change happens when we begin by showing up for ourselves. So are you wondering, would Michaela handle Mike differently now? Yes, I most certainly would. Yes, it's my story. Yeah, I've broken the bias. Thank you.
Congratulations. Well done. There's some lovely comments coming through there. Scott McLaughlin, you're amazing. Michelle, this is the truth telling. Thank you, Michaela. I love seeing you allowing yourself to be seen. It's truly beautiful. So proud to call you my friend. So proud of you. Your courage, determination, truth. Love it, love it, love it. Powerful, Michelle. So yes, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And And I of course knew that wee story anyway, because we had worked together on our talk. So I was sitting waiting for the reveal. But thank you so much.
Wonderful story, Michelle. And I have to say, it really resonated with me, because I sort of went through that process of revealing my own truth to myself over the last couple of years. And it's, you know, I have written about it quite extensively, and I had a bit of a bias of, you know, what to share and what not to share. But, you know, I think now I would have perhaps done things differently. I'd have bought a different pair of shoes too. So Gary, anything further for Michelle? Any questions from the panel or from the audience?
There's nothing else. Such a powerful story. Thank you, Michelle from Jody, Michelle Flowers, powerful Michelle. Just everybody's really appreciating the I suppose the, you know, the vulnerability shown there as well. Somebody, Kellyanne said earlier, the power of the inner narrative. When we change that, we change everything. Love this, Michelle. Robert, amazing story, Michelle, and so true, so true. There's an early trend developing about the inner talk, isn't there? The inner narrative and the inner conversations that we have, and I'm sure that trend will continue, because it's so important, really, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again, Michelle. Congratulations. That was a wonderful talk, and I loved your story. Thank you. Shall we move on now? And I will introduce Jody Sainsbury. Jody, how are you today? You've had a busy day, I can tell.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Hello. Hello. Let me properly introduce Jody to you. Jo is a walking, talking success story of how to take the plunge into industry that can open up a world of opportunity, and you can do it too. So Jo is a published author of a #1 best-selling book titled High Heels to High Viz. Congratulations, Jo, where she suggests how you can kick off your high heels and tap into your steel caps. Jo is also the creator and founder of Kickass Women and the host of her own radio show and podcast, Kickass Radio. I've been a guest on the show recently myself, so I can attest to Jo's spirit. We had a spirited conversation that day. So Kickass Women is about connecting and supporting women throughout their career. Jo was named as One to Watch in 2021 Osmumpreneur Awards. Sorry, I can't get my mouth around that. One of the 2020's top 100 women in construction, Raw Business Awards bronze winner, and finalist in both the 2020 and 2021 Women in Industry Awards. She's been making waves as an enforcer, I love that, kick-ass, for women working in industry. Now, as I said, Jo, I was on your show recently. We had a wonderful time and a wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to your topic today, which is changing the lens to reframe and refocus. So Jo says the single most powerful thing an organisation can do to promote more women within the workforce is to create a culture of the conscious inclusion. Jo, we can't wait to hear more. Take it away.
I'm just recording this myself. Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. So we all have unconscious bias. No matter how hard we try, we are all guilty of it, at least to some degree. Every single one of us. It's an uncomfortable reality, but it's only when we accept the existence of our biases, both conscious and unconscious, that we can begin to work through them and move forward. We can think of bias as the lens through which we view the world. Automatically, it filters how we take in and act on information that's presented to us. And to work through our biases, we first need to call them out and identify them. Now, some biases we're aware of, but others are harder to identify because we all have unconscious attitudes that impact our thoughts and behaviour. Whether they're born through our own lived experiences, societal stigma, or cultural beliefs. These unconscious attitudes can be deeply embedded within us and can actually have a really big impact on our thoughts and actions, even if we don't realise it. Exposing our unconscious bias is a complicated process. because accepting that we have these harmful ideals can be really difficult to swallow. For the most part, we're all doing our best to be good people. We're all doing our best to live good lives and hopefully leave the world in a better place than when we found it. So it can be a really confronting thing to become aware of our biases and the harms they cause, especially when it can be so hard to find them and even harder to address them. As women, unconscious bias is something we experience a lot. I recently had an experience where I was in a meeting only to realise my voice was the only one being excluded in the conversation. I was also the only woman in the meeting. I wondered if it was just me, and I questioned myself, thinking surely these people aren't excluding me purely based on my gender. Surely I was reading too much into it, but I wasn't. Despite having valuable insights during this meeting, I basically blended in to the decor for no other reason than my gender. Unfortunately, instances like this and worse are all too common. It can look like snarky, discriminatory comments or being overlooked for promotions and leadership positions in favour of a man. It can be an assumption of our skills or a lack thereof. It can be having our voices silenced or ridiculed. And it can be things like sexual harassment, something that 40% of women will experience in the workplace at some point in their lives. As women, we see examples of this every single day because the reality is that unconscious gender bias is incredibly prevalent in our daily lives. Mothers, for example, often cop a lot of flack for needing to leave work to pick up their kids. As a result, they're seen as unreliable, when the reality is both men and women often need to pick up the kids. But the lens in which we view the actions of women is stained with these unconscious biases. Conflictingly, women are also expected to be nurturing and likeable. Leaders, however, are expected to be assertive and forthright. But if a woman possesses these qualities, she's deemed to be unlikable or too bossy to be a good leader. Women are also more likely to be questioned about our competence. We're more likely to have our authority undermined, and we're more likely to face disrespectful behaviour as a result. I've spent the last 30 years working in some incredibly male-dominated fields, including construction, mining, heavy machinery and rail. And in that time, I've seen a lot of these little microaggressions where women are shut out of conversations, silenced, our voices ignored, our contributions deemed valueless. And when a woman does manage to climb the ranks, despite these biases, it's a pretty common for the whole, oh, she only got the job because they're ticking a box and meeting gender equality quotas to be thrown around. I vividly remember a few years ago when I was promoted to a leadership position, I copped a lot of flack from one particular male colleague who was also considered for the role and obviously wasn't successful. I'd come from a corporate background, and because of this, he told me I wasn't qualified for the role. He told me, you only got the position because you're a woman. Now, at the time, I was really hurt and I was angry by his accusation. I had nearly 3 decades of experience, and despite what his hurt ego might say, I was very well suited for the position. And I was shocked too, because this was the first time I'd encountered such a direct bias. And it really frustrated me that this man assumed I was only hired for the role to tick a diversity box. Because, God forbid, a woman could actually be qualified. Even when I worked in corporate, it was always on job sites and within the civil and construction industries. But did this man ask about my experience? No, he simply assumed. He assumed that because I am a woman, I don't have the necessary experience. He assumed the only reason I was promoted was because of my gender, when in reality, women have so much value to contribute to a workplace, particularly in leadership positions. I stood my ground against the man. I told him, obviously, I do have the experience, the knowledge and the know-how to perform the role because I was the one hired for it. The right candidate was chosen and it just so happened to be a woman. Men aren't the only ones to have this unconscious bias against women. We can be just as guilty of internalising misogyny. Several studies have shown that even women can have the unconscious bias that men are more competent than women. And sometimes even women who do manage to climb the ranks can be just as problematic. Now, coined back in 1973, the Queen Bee syndrome refers to women in authority positions who view or treat subordinates more critically if they are female. Unfortunately, I have also personally experienced this. Battling unconscious gender bias is exhausting, and obviously unconscious bias is something that affects so many groups around the world. But what can we do about unconscious bias when it is so prevalent in our lives? I believe the single most powerful thing an organisation can do is to create a culture of conscious inclusion. We need to build the capacity of staff to lead, think and act with the conscious intent of including everyone. And that begins with awareness. To dismantle unconscious gender bias, employees need to understand the barriers faced by women, especially women who experience additional marginalisation. Organisations need to be committed to diversity and inclusion and ensure people of diverse identities are represented. But despite companies proclaiming that gender and racial diversity are among their most important business priorities, only about 2/3 of companies hold their senior leaders accountable for progress on diversity goals. There are, unfortunately, no quick fixes for addressing unconscious bias, but thankfully, there are steps we can take, like including women with diverse identities, encouraging and facilitating more female representation in upper and middle management, like holding organisations accountable, like learning about these unconscious biases and actively working to address them, reframing our perception of biases, not as an attack on the perpetrators, but as a coming together to do better. We are all biased to some extent, and that does not make us bad people. It makes us human. But the only way we can move forward is by becoming actively aware of our biases and taking action in a way that benefits us all. You can start by reviewing your internal conversations. Do you hold preconceived beliefs about someone simply due to their gender? Are you basing your decisions on quantitative and qualitative information rather than unconscious bias? It is also vital to interact with and learn from people who have different lived experiences to you. Make sure you break your own patterns and make an effort to learn what it's actually like to walk in someone else's shoes and what barriers they face. Develop a core value system that focuses on respect and fair treatment for all humans, no matter their background, and stick to these values in every decision you make. Often we get stuck in negative patterns without even realising it. So it's important to notice all the ways your perceptions may be subliminally shaped and make sure to take care of yourself. Unconscious bias is much more likely to surface when we're exhausted or stressed, because that's when we are much less effective on processing new information and tend to rely on unconscious patterns. And remember, the rise of women is not about the fall of men. We need men and women to challenge unconscious bias and champion its removal from the workplace and society in general, because change starts with those who are willing to step up, work together, learn, listen and lead, and we can't do it alone. It will only work if we can all accept that we all have implicit bias and if we all commit to diligent self-awareness. It's not from a place of hate, but from a place of love and desire for positive change. So today on International Women's Day, I ask you to reframe your perception of unconscious bias. Refocus your efforts on dismantling it and help us break down the barriers and biases that hinder women's inclusion and success. Women cannot do it alone. It starts with businesses and it starts with individuals who have the courage to take a stand to reshape the future of women in the workplace and beyond, for now and for countless generations to come. Let's break the bias.
Thank you so much, Jo. Didn't I tell you that Jo's a human dynamo? And sharing your story again, when I heard your story, it just made me feel like when I was bullied in the corporate life, and, you know, that game of whack-a-mole, you know, not getting knocked on the head at all costs.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
you know, we said earlier, this isn't about man bashing, but it is about being far more conscious about how you act and be, you know, how you think and act and behave. And so thank you again.
Thank you.
Gary, do you have
Yes.
any questions?
I don't have any questions, but Joe, I wanted to add, firstly, it's lovely to meet you. I've seen the name flying about online and we see each other and all the rest of it, but we never get to speak. So it's an honor to speak to you. Thank you. The second thing was, actually, this is a very interesting topic for me personally, because I facilitated 2 talks, high-level talks recently on this subject, or sorry, a subject that leans into this. One was from a female engineer who in the UK is a bit of a trailblazer. She's quite young and she's making all sorts of headlines because she's making headlines for being a female trailblazer in the industry. You know, which she should be just making headlines for being a trailblazer in the industry. But and her talk was why women shouldn't be engineers. And obviously she was playing a part. She was playing with words, of course, and that talk had massive success. Then a friend of mine also did another talk, and interestingly, he is a male. He owns an engineering company, and he admitted in his talk, which I'll share with everybody. He admitted in his talk that he was one of those men that actually needed educated. You know, he needed the conversation to bring to his conscious awareness of the unconscious biases that he had. He was intimidated. He admitted to being intimidated in boardroom meetings in case the female knew more than him about the engineering topic, and he felt intimidated in the room. He was scared to speak, and so on and so forth. And it was an amazing conversation. And the construction industry in the UK, it is a hot topic and has been for the last 12, 18 months about changing this and breaking this bias. So the point I'm making is keep your conversation going. You never know who's listening worldwide. You just never know who's listening to what we say. I talk about this on social media all the time. Just because you don't get certain engagement from certain people doesn't mean they ain't seeing and hearing what you're saying. And we are influencing people far wide. So keep your message, keep pumping your amazing work. You just never know who's listening.
Yeah. So thanks, Gary. And I think we can all agree on Breaking the Bias Day that we'll challenge gender stereotypes and discrimination and bias. So Gary, I'd ask you now if you would like to introduce your next speaker, who is Sarah.
Yes, absolutely. The wonderful phenomenon that is Sarah Blake. Sarah is a friend and somebody that I class as a close confidant and that I would take a lot of advice and should I say mentorship from. Sarah is a powerhouse, one of the world's leading conflict strategists and mediation experts, an author, a mother, a wife, a friend, and just a fabulous human being, honestly. And that's the biggest compliment I can pay her, and it's amazing having her here. It's a great pleasure for me personally to listen. And over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Your words are beautiful and so generous, and it's such an honour to be here today and to join you all. So I am a conflict strategist. What does that actually mean? It means that I elevate leaders and empowering them to overcome conflict barriers. I help them have hard conversations, lean into those difficult conversations so they can find their own solutions. I often end up with the back end of when people have experienced those bias and those conflicts, and they come to me because they don't know what to do with it and they're overwhelmed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but I wanted to really start this conversation a little differently. There's 2 things that stand out for me, is that I want to share why International Women's Day means something to me. I have a love-hate relationship with International Women's Day. In my young years, I was all idealistic and how wonderful this is to celebrate women. And then I kind of lived a life, right? And I'm confronted with the biases, with the prejudice, with the discrimination, with the harsh reality that can be women in leadership. And it felt really tokenistic to celebrate International Women's Day. Here, let's roll out the women. Look how great we are. Look how much we're doing. But we're going to not pay the women for their speaking gigs, and we're just going to take their knowledge and we're going to say, oh, look, they're great. We employ a female. And so I felt very disillusioned by that, in a sense, commercialization of International Women's Day. So what I did is I reflected on my own bias, right? I put into practice and I reimagined what this day could mean for me. So for me, International Women's Day is a chance to recognise and celebrate the women that have impacted my life, the women that have given me confidence to stand up, the women who have paved the way and made me who I am today, because I honour them on this day. The days to fight, to take on the battles, to keep using my voice, they are every day of the year. But this day, I honour those that have paved the way for me. And I want to bring some of that energy and that gratitude to this conversation. I'm going to adjust my talk. Gary knows me. I tend to talk from the cuff a fair bit. And I'm hearing a lot of really consistent messages from everyone about this inner dialogue. And I want to shape it and shift things around. I'm going to stir things up a little bit because I am about having hard conversations. But I wanted to start with language. As has been alluded to, language is powerful. But what are bias? Biases develop partly as a way for our brains to make sense of the world around us. They develop over the course of your life. Your beliefs, your attitudes, your experience all shape the way your brain thinks about these things. And as has been said, we all have biases. We also have preferences and prejudices. Now, these can be positive and constructive, but they also can be negative and destructive. So I think it's really important to recognise that just because a bias exists, we can't let it diminish as well. We need to celebrate the positives and recognise those difficult things. The real problem exists, not about the bias, but when those biases translate to action, when they emerge into prejudice and discrimination. And don't be confusing people's bias with prejudice and discrimination, because so much of what I've experienced, what Jodie was also talking about, are actually prejudices and discriminations, actions that are not okay, actions that diminish us as women. Our biases feed this. These are the messaging, but it's the action that makes a difference. So what do I see happening? When people come to me having experienced a confronting moment, a bias, sometimes they have become silenced by that experience. It diminishes them. They feel uncertain about what to do with that. And can I use my voice? Sometimes they allow themselves to feel victim to it. And that does happen. And sometimes their experiences are so confronting that there's nothing else to do with it. Sometimes when people experience bias, they get angry, right? They become really reactive in their anger and they lash out. Sometimes when we react to bias, we model and conform to those labels and standards we think they want us to be. Be that pretty little woman who just sits there and doesn't raise the hard issues. Just do what you're told, right? You know, I've been in boardrooms where I've been told that, oh, you're just a woman, you don't really know what's going on here. And, you know, this is only a couple of years ago. We're still dealing with this. We have a long way to go. Because breaking bias requires change. It requires action. And it requires a shift in power dynamics. It means that some of those in power will need to share their power. And you know what? Most people don't like change. Why? Change is hard. It requires us to own our own role in the situation, and it is so much easier to blame others. We don't like acknowledging mistakes or wrongdoing. And our bias are often deep-seated, linked to our personal views of who we are. So we react, we lash out, and we blame. Things get messy. The cost is often high, but fights rarely result in sustainable culture change. Many of us, men, women, everybody in between, appreciate and recognise the value that diversity brings to our lives. And yet, these power dynamics seem to stagnate. Here in Australia, politicians and power brokers continue to resist accountability and action. Rather, they fall back into demonising those courageous women who push for change. This isn't just bias, it's prejudice and discrimination. It's about their desires to retain control and power. Now, we can have a fight, and it's sometimes needed, but if we want to create culture change, we need to engage everybody in this journey. To do that, we need a plan, we need to talk, and we need to bring people along with us. Now, if only our superpower as humans was to be able to wrestle through these hard conversations about difference in a way that focused on respectful solutions that we could live with, rather than seeking for a perfect one-sided outcome. Unfortunately, many of us are left to live with and deal with those imbalances of power. So today, I really want to encourage each of you to think about those biases that confront you and impact you and how you respond to them. Are you letting it have power over you? Or are you taking that experience, reshaping and redefining it and making it your own, transforming it into an opportunity? As women, we can no longer wait for someone to give us the power, to listen to us. Sometimes we need to reimagine and reframe that opportunity. We need to be confident to own our power. But we also need to be cautious that we too are not falling prey to the very biased barriers that we have lived and experienced. As we seek to break the bias, let's call this movement what it really is: a need to reimagine power and how it is used. We each need to find our own power, one that is free of expectations, one that is disciplined in action and thought, one that is reflective and resilient. In doing so, we lead with example. We are no longer victims to the bias of others. We are empowered to transform these moments into our own. We are breaking the internal bonds that we have let define us. I hope that from this, that you can each find your own courage, not just in thought, not just in reflecting your bias, but in action, because change will take all of us. Thank you.
Well done, Sarah. What did I tell you? How good was she? That's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the peaceful, respectful resolution part. That made me think respectful resolution. It's not just about, winning or one side winning or feeling you've won. A respectful resolution where everybody can, if possible, not always possible, I know, but and I love that. And I also loved the bit where you're talking about responding, which Sarah and I have had a years back and forth about how I react and don't respond enough because of my nature, which is vastly improved because of Sarah and her wisdom and her advice. So I want to publicly thank you for that on International Women's Day, and I am grateful for that. And you have helped me. You have helped position and frame my mindset that I respond and don't react. So thank you so much, and I really value you, and that was beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you for the patience with my kids in the background. Life, right? International Women's Day.
Yes.
Messiness. Thank you.
So Sarah, look, change is uncomfortable really hit me right in the heart. Change is uncomfortable. And my experience is that biases live in the unconscious mind. And I love the notion of reimagining power. It really spoke to me. So on this International Women's Day, I would say we will try to influence others' beliefs and actions. And, you know, let's all get uncomfortable. Now,
Genene,
Gary.
Genene, I just wanted to read out a few of the comments for Sarah as well. Yes. Leanne says, great points there, Sarah. Great keyword and reimagine. Thanks, Sarah, says Jody. Great take on this, says Michelle. There's loads more. Where are we? Heck yes, Sarah, says Laura. She was getting empowered and fired up at one of your points. Love it. Thank you, and great to be sharing the evening with you all, says Jody. Scott says it requires men to be enlisted as part of the solution instead of the root of the problem. First step away. Absolutely, Scott. You speak up for us. You're right, totally. We need to be in a conversation together. So important. Kelly says that's right. The issue is never the issue, so we find out ourselves reacting and understanding, or reacting, not understanding exactly. I can't read the rest of that for some reason. Reacting and not understanding exactly what we're reacting to. So good for you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Yeah, some beautiful comments coming in there.
Thanks again, Sarah. Congratulations. It was thoroughly enjoyable talk today, and I think we all got something out of it. We can all agree. So our next speaker is Leanne Cummings. Leanne, you're coming to the stage, so get ready. Now, I've been looking forward to this particular talk from Leanne. Her voice is like I imagine drinking honey mead is. So let's just see who Leanne is. So she's a life coach, mentor, and people management expert who's known as one of Australia's most influential life coaches. She's an expert in her industry and has accumulated over 10,000 coaching hours. After working with Leanne, as I do in my business, you'll quickly discover that she's a woman who genuinely cares about people and the people she works with, and is a cheerleader. The cheerleader you wished you always had. So Leanne is on a mission to help as many people as possible become happy for no reason. I can get on board with that. And she understands that life has its challenges. Imagine a world full of people better equipped to understand themselves and manage stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and depression on their own as a result of having access to their own personal toolkit. Leanne will be talking about why so many people felt burnt out, tired, and unhappy with their lives before COVID, and discussing breaking the bias around the hustle of business and growth development and how this was negatively impacting our families, our health, and our finances. So welcome, Leanne. I'm certain our audience is going to be interested in hearing more about breaking through the hustle bias. Leanne Cummings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Genene. And yes, that is something that I really would like to talk about, is why did so many of us feel burnt out, tired, and unhappy before COVID? You know, there is a real bias around a hustle culture. I think if we go back to 2 years ago, we would all relate and recognise the hustle culture. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. However, there really was such a negative impact that we were experiencing from that hustle culture, be it was impacting upon our families, our health, our finances, and our ability to really take care of self in the midst. So let's just travel back in time for a moment and go back to the year 2019. And did we ever imagine that we would reflect and pine after a year of our life? You know, often we're happy to put that year behind us, but little did we know what was ahead of us at the end of 2019. And so if we just go back to that and remember what life was kind of like, what some of our thoughts were, such as, you know, we talked about the dream job that somebody might be after is one that probably pays about 150K, and you can work from home at least one day a week. That would have been the dream job. We also were led to believe that a successful business was only one that earned in excess of 10K a month. We were all planning our big holidays. Often, you know, they were overseas at luxurious locations and resorts. We were living a very lavished life. Now, when I say lavish life, we could freely go out to restaurants and just had the freedom to do what we want and plan for what it was that we wanted. We really could have whatever we wanted. We had interest-free everything. So you want something, you can go and put that on interest-free. Even mortgages, you could get whatever home you wanted pretty much because the interest rates were really low. Like there was anything and everything we wanted was literally at our fingertips. However, what was that life actually costing us in the end? It was a cost that it's only in reflection we realize was not actually good for us. Now, at the time, it was, well, it just is what it is. You know, you want this kind of career, you want this kind of business, there is a certain way that you are to go about that. And the sacrifice is usually the things that mattered most to us. But it was all in the name of, you know, being able to have that lifestyle, achieve those heights of success, you know, have that title, have that name, right? It seemed like it was kind of worth it, really. And that's what everyone was doing. So I want to share with you what the definition is of the hustle culture. The hustle culture is where work dominates your time in such an unnatural way that we have no time to actually live our life. Meaning it becomes a lifestyle where career and business has such a priority in your life or the environment that you work in that other aspects of being human, such as hobbies, family time, and self-care, often take a back seat. Now, does anyone relate to that? Do you remember if you wanted that 150, 200K job, you could have that job, but it was at a cost. You know, it was at a cost. And guess what? Just is what it was. You know, if you started to really feel burnt out, what were some of the things that we would hear? And it was so common. Now we've probably forgotten now 2 years down the track, but do you recognize words like build a bridge and get over it? Suck it up, princess. Keep going, keep going. You know, everyone else is feeling this as well. It's just how it is, you know, and it was literally only the strongest made it through. And if you struggled for any reason, even if it was a valid reason, right, you've been neglecting your health so much that your body is starting to shut down and there's some kind of disease in your body, then you are still encouraged to push through. You know, go find some kind of medication or get yourself fixed and get back into the workplace. It wasn't actually a very fun time. Now, my business is Work-Life Balance Academy. And for many years, I've been running this for 13 years, and you can imagine some of the comments that I might have heard about having a business called Work-Life Balance Academy. Work-life balance, that doesn't exist. It's never going to exist. You know, like I would get so many comments. And yet for me, I'm like, I'm not out there trying to say that there is this perfect balance between life and work. Not at all, because what is a healthy work-life balance for me is different to what a healthy work-life balance might be for you. Now, that's very dependent on our values, the things that are important to us. Health, finance, holiday, like everything, it's different. I operate at a much slower pace than somebody else who operates at a higher pace. So how they choose to live a full life is very different to how I choose to live a full life. So I don't have this system for a perfect work-life balance. But what I am a huge advocate for is that people do not neglect any area of their life as they are choosing to maintain a growth mindset and work towards a vision for their life. I'm big on all of that. However, I'm not an advocate for you neglecting your family, for you neglecting your loved ones, for you neglecting your children, your health, your finances even. Like, people have been working and earning all these extra incomes and have less money. How is that even possible? How is that even possible that you can be earning all this extra money and still be broke, right? So I'm not, when I promote work-life balance, I'm thinking about every area of your life receiving some attention, because I have had so many couples go through my practice who were really career focused or spent all their time building their business, and then their marriage fell apart. Their children went off the rails, or they were suffering immensely with their health. It wasn't worth it. So here we are 2 years down the track. You may have heard of the saying, it's become this, we're in a season of the great resignation. Well, once upon a time, if you asked to be able to work from home, you're either told, no, sorry, we don't do that around here. Or, you know, if you wanted part-time, you had to really fight for that. 2 years down the track, we have now created the ability for everybody to be able to work from home. And we have now gone from employers dictating to us the conditions that we will work in, whether we like it or not, to employers and business owners can't even find a staff member. Now, I heard something ridiculous a number of months ago where there was a restaurant in Sydney who was offering to pay somebody $50,000 up front if they would commit to 12 months of washing their dishes. What an extreme shift we have gone to. From, no, you can't have all these things, you've got to hustle, you know, to get anywhere in life. This is just how it is around here. To we now have the opportunity to break that bias around this hustle culture. It was never healthy. It was never healthy. And so now we get to reinvent our lives. Reimagine is the word that keeps popping up tonight. Reimagine what we want for ourselves, because what I want for my life is different to what you want for your life. And so I encourage everybody tonight to take some time to think about what is important to you. What are you prepared to sacrifice? Everything has a sacrifice, but maybe the sacrifices have kind of gotten a little bit skewy, because I have seen more and more people. I wasn't sure about my professional services, what COVID was going to do with that, yet it was the complete opposite. Instead of things going down, it went up. I got so many hits because people weren't looking for Leanne Cummings. They were searching work-life balance. And that's how I was found. So I encourage you now to reevaluate, where are you heading and at what pace are you prepared to travel on that path, and what are you now never, ever, ever going to compromise. So thank you for everybody listening in and leaning in on International Women's Day. I really appreciate this platform. It's not comfortable for me to do this, but we were talking about, you know, the importance of stepping out and embracing uncertainty and that sense of uncomfortable. And so I am trusting that by doing that, I got to reach one person, and it was worth them coming on tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
for sharing your insight. You know, I meet people every day that feel enslaved to the job or the business, and particularly business folks, many of whom are here tonight. Many people started that business so they'd have more time, money, and freedom, and it just didn't happen. Then COVID came along, and that thing we're not supposed to talk about any longer, and it really changed the way we think about work and life. I know myself, I've had my husband at home for the last 12 months, and he went back to work last week, and it's just upended our life again. But the reality was we really eased into life. We had more time. We started to enjoy each other's company again. We rebuilt broken relationships and friendships and so on. And we really got connected. For a time we weren't able to connect other than via technology. We really got reconnected with not just ourselves, but the people around us and, you know, our loved ones. And so thank you, Kellyanne, for reminding us about having balance across all areas of our life, work, family, relationships, and so on. It's great to have had you on and speak tonight.
Thank you,
Gary,
Jenny.
do you have any questions from the audience or comments?
Some comments there. Leanne said, so important. Jody said, great job, Kellyanne, value share, and thank you. And I just wanted to add myself, you know, I be very, very busy myself, but what I have focused on over the last 6 months, not so much hustle. Yes, I'm busy. We all want to be busy. We all want to be productive. We all want to do well. We're all striving for X, Y, Z. But what I have really focused on is injecting more joy and happiness in my life, because I meet many, many successful people with what I do, and much more successful than me. And a lot of people would feedback to me that they don't experience enough joy or happiness or fulfillment. And that's so important for me. And it's actually one of my core values that I've implemented and pillars that I've implemented into my life. If something doesn't bring me joy or happiness, unless it's life-threatening, I'm not doing it. and if it's within my business, I'll delegate it, or you know, or outsource it, or automate it, or whatever you want to call it. But I'd certainly not be sitting doing it. and that's something that I wasn't able to do at the start of my business, to be fair, when you have to do all these things. Absolutely. But as you grow, you evolve, and as you evolve, you can make you can create freedom and time through choices that we make. And that's something that's been very, very important to me. So I just wanted to pass that on or feed that back to you all.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I obviously, if I had a little bit more time, I would talk about that, you know, learning to be happy for no reason at all, because I too had the privilege of working with some pretty amazing people. And on the outskirts, it looks like they've got it all together, right? They are a real success, but they are absolutely miserable, or their lives are just falling apart behind Instagram, behind their website. And that's the false illusion that people are thinking is real. It's not.
Happiness is the goal. Happiness is the goal. Yes.
Thank you so much again, Kellyanne and Gary. So I want to introduce now our next speaker, who is Leanne Kanzler. She's a TEDx speaker, #1 best-selling author, psychologist and coach with a private psychology practice in Australia. She has a coaching focus on break up to break through. Now we're going to change things up. We're changing gears here, which is a little bit of a mannish thing to say, but we're going to change up the gears.
So go for it.
Leanne says she first realised that there was a problem with men seeking help after her marriage of 17 years broke down. And through her dating experiences, she saw that many men do not work on themselves. They carry that pain into the next relationship and action. Similarly, unaddressed behavioural patterns. And I see that in my work too, Leanne, with people going through separation and divorce. That impacts women. It then impacts the women, their partners. So Leanne points to this as leading to many men being unfairly labelled as narcissists, addicts, or abuser, whilst they're in fact traumatised and trying to survive. Who isn't? Well, Leanne is passionate about making a stand for mental health of men and says that By understanding men, together we can protect families, reduce violence in the home towards women and men, and reduce suicide, which would be a wonderful outcome. So welcome, Leanne. I'm keenly interested in hearing more about breaking through the bias. Leanne Kanzler.
Thank you so much. So that was such a large introduction. I forgot what I actually had submitted, but that was awesome. So I'd like to start by asking you all a question. Have you ever considered the importance of working with men, abusive men, to stop violence against women and in the home?
Excuse me, Leanne, I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in. Your speaker isn't your mic isn't very loud.
Ah, okay.
There we go, that's getting better. Thank you.
All right, I just think.
Go ahead.
All right, do you want me to start again? Could you hear me? Okay. Okay. So have you ever considered the importance of working with men, abusive men, to stop violence against women and in the home, rather than focusing on the victims of domestic abuse? Have you ever wondered why the rate of male suicide is 3 times higher than the rate of suicide in women? Do you know that there are also far more men in jails than women, with the vast majority of them having experienced childhood trauma? The way I see it is that we will never have a major impact on the numbers around domestic violence, suicide, or jail sentencing if we do not work with men. And you may be wondering, why am I talking about men on International Women's Day? Let me explain. Every single one of you knows a man. Some of you listening are men. Every single one of you has a father. Some of you have a partner, a brother, a cousin, a boss, a colleague, an employee, a friend, maybe even a son. Some of you listening are fathers. The men in our lives affect us deeply, one way or another. Some in an amazing, positive way, some in a disastrous way. And today I want to acknowledge how important it is to recognise trauma in men, in stopping domestic violence, suicide, jail, and more. I can assure you that most of the men who are violent do not do it because they get joy from it. They do it because they are hurt, because they are wounded, because they are carrying a deep trauma within them that they do not know how to manage. And this manifests as an anger so deep that they do not know how to handle it. They don't know what to do with the internal pain and the traumatic memories, so they take it out on other people or themselves, their partners, sometimes even their children. What this means is that these traumatized men are more likely to become addicts because the addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, porn, or sex is easier to handle than the hate that they feel for themselves. They do whatever it takes to stop the pain, to stop the scream in their head that they think cannot be silenced, because they are too ashamed to talk about it or feel no one can help them. They do whatever it takes to hide the truth of their internal narrative of not being good enough and to numb themselves. And that can also manifest in violence towards their partners or themselves, or even in allowing themselves to be the victims of violence because they feel so powerless. And all of this affects women. The more we push down our emotions, the more they fight with us. The more we try to stop the emotions, the more they come out. They come out in mental illness, such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and even symptoms of narcissism. And this all affects women. For women, it's important to acknowledge that many men still do not know how to talk about their emotions. In particular, men who have been traumatized, because men are taught very early to shut down their emotions. As little boys, the way they deal with their hurt and pain is to bully or to fight. Sometimes it's just play fight, sometimes it's not. For women, as teenagers and even little girls, we can talk nonstop until our friends feel like their ears are going to bleed with the constant chit chat of all the pain that we feel in our lives. We start early with talking to each other, but men and boys, they don't do that. Men and boys shut down. They pretend everything is okay. They internalize how they are feeling because they do not want to look weak or unmanly. They put on their mask, as Lewis Howes calls it, the mask of masculinity. These masks can look like going out and playing sport and getting rough on the fields with other players. They can go out and pick a fight with whoever is available to fight with, but they don't talk about their problems. They pretend that life is a joke and become the clown. They become players where their sexual conquest disguises the deep hurt within, but they don't show their vulnerability. They focus on financial or career success because maybe then they will be seen as good enough. They don't want to be seen as though there is something wrong with them. They choose to be tough, manly, and not show the real issue, just in case they are seen as weak. And all of this affects women. And then these same tough men who appear to be so confident, brave, and masculine meet someone. They fall in love and everything is pushed down even further. They do whatever it takes to hide from their partner how they truly feel. This is true of all relationships, not just heterosexual ones, because a traumatized person wants to forget. They don't want you to know how bad it really is. They want you to see the facade of a perfectly put together man. But then after a few months, maybe after a few years, if you're lucky, after you have fallen in love with them and want to help them and save them, the truth comes out. It might start with simple things like getting picky. It might seem like they are just trying to love you. You know, things like, I don't want you to wear that. I don't want you to go out without me. I want you to stay home with me. I love spending time with you. Don't go out with the girls. They're no good for you. Be with me. I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one who will look after you. And it can feel like this person is so in love with you that they want to be with you. It can feel intoxicating. And that soon changes. The intoxication becomes suffocation. And then it can get worse, picking on all sorts of little things with more and more venom, more and more control. But what does all this mean? Well, we have all done it. I have, my husband has, my friends have, you have. So just think about it. When we are tired or hungry, this is the simplest form of losing control of ourselves. When we are overburdened with work, financial or family stress, we can become someone we don't like. But when we are tired and stressed, dealing with trauma and feeling out of control, it all adds up. When we are out of control internally, it shows up externally. We need to look at the underlying causes of bad behavior, acknowledge it, see it for what it is, and work on it. There is a reason people, men and women, become abusive, unreasonable, silent. And seeing the truth rather than simply labeling it is a better option for all involved. Offering real help is a much better solution. We need to be able to call out bad behavior. In doing so, we may be instigator of great change. If, as women, we are overwhelmed, it is acceptable to go and talk to a professional, but for men, it is still a far tougher decision to make. And this affects women. It's time to break the bias that affects us all. What will it take for men to accept that they are simply human too? They are vulnerable. They feel all the same emotions as us. If our trauma and pain is hurting us, it is on us to get the help we need. And wouldn't it be nice if we all could see when someone needed professional help and we were not afraid to suggest it? Because it's not a weakness. We need to spread the word that doing deep inner work is not for the weak-minded or crazy folk. In fact, I would say it is the total opposite. It takes a load of courage to talk to a total stranger about your deepest, darkest moments. Dealing with it can make all the difference in a relationship and to an individual. It may even save a life. It is so important to take responsibility for how we feel and not blame somebody else. But that is what trauma does to us. It's like an insidious disease that buries within us. It creates a monster within us. It creates someone we don't like and someone we don't know. Anxiety, depression, defensiveness, silence. But it can all change by doing the work. All of this can be changed when we understand where the pain originates from. when we understand that the inner child is completely controlling us. And in fact, it's not a monster at all. That wounded little boy or little girl who has no outlet, who doesn't understand what's happening to them or why they are so upset, all of this can change when we release the pain, the shame, and the guilt. All of this can change when we feel loved, acknowledged, heard, and seen. It's time to break the bias, and therapy can help that. I have learned that the little girl inside who was scared and ashamed was truly loved by her parents. I learned that I didn't have to be afraid, that I could speak up, I could own who I am, and I have a powerful gift to share, and that my words mean something. I learned to love myself. And I know that all of these learnings are possible for everyone here listening right now, because if I can take myself from a disempowered child to a powerful adult, then I know it is possible for you too. Women, chances are there is a man in your life who needs help, and that is impacting you. That's why I'm talking about this today. We all live in a society together. We are not segregated. Our lives are all entwined. It is time to break the bias, to ensure that as we rise up and find our power as women, that we bring along every human who stands beside us, because there is no power in disempowering the men around us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne, for sharing your insights there. I told you Leanne's talk would challenge you to some extent, and you know, the knock-on effect could be extremely valuable. So let's commit to help men be better, and let's break the bias of gender inequality. We're all human, and you know, it's time for a change and to challenge the status quo. Thank you again, Leanne. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's
Gary.
some comments coming in there. This is fantastic, Leanne, from Kellyanne. This is powerful, Leanne, from Michelle Flowers. Naila, hold on one second. Naila says, such an important topic. I see my sons need most of the time personal talk time with me than my daughter. He feels so emotional as a teenager and needs to talk. Kellyanne, just beautifully, Anne, a therapist many years ago, taught me the same thing. Jody, perfect example of changing our lens and refocusing and reframing, powerful moves. Scott said, I'm deeply grateful for your insights, Leanne, so true. There is a aloneness that needs to be understood. What a great talk. We are in this together and we must break this bias together. Outstanding, says Kelly. Michelle says, love this, Leanne, we're on the same page. You have said it with grace and strength. Congratulations. Jody says, great job, Leanne. And Leanne, I know from our conversations and our work together, how difficult is it having this particular conversation publicly, say in social media, for example? How do you find much opposition, or is it inclusive?
Surprisingly, I don't get hardly any opposition at all. And yeah, it's been amazing. The biggest opposition I have had is trying to get people to hear my TED talk, because as you know, it's unlisted, deemed objectionable, or yes, it can be disturbing because I talk about suicide in men.
Yeah.
Objectionable. I don't know. I don't know why talking about men's mental health is objectionable. Maybe because I talk about how men are abused as well. And I am very passionate about this, because we cannot stop violence against women if we don't work with men. It just blows my mind that there's so much talk about we need more shelters, we need more money for women. That's fantastic, but it's not going to stop if we don't help men.
Yeah, no, and I raised that question because of our experience with TED and the platform and their reluctance to make the talk mainstream. They couldn't stop it going up. Well, they could, but they didn't stop it going up. But they did stop it being searchable. So if Leanne has the link to her talk, you can click on the link to her talk, but you can't search Leanne Kanzler's TED talk. They have it unlisted, but so there's still, you know, there's still conversations to be had around this subject. Obviously, when they when they felt that, you know, that's why I stimulate the conversation, you know. But thank you so much for sharing that. And interestingly, a talk that I did with a guy, Tony Bradford, in Australia, he in his talk, he talks about suicide, male suicide, and he talks about boys talk when they walk, you know, when they're exercising or when they're doing something or when they're distracted or when they're in the car or when they're on a journey or when they're at a match or in the bar or wherever the hell it is, they'll talk. But sit a man down, they have that harsh conversation. We're not great. No, well, that's a generalization, but okay, I'm not great at it. But a lot of men wouldn't be fantastic at it, you know. So yeah, important conversation, and thank you for sharing. Genene, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, look, let's face it, there's people in the LGBTIQA community as well that, you know, gender fluid or identify as different sexually speaking. And so, you know, some of the people in that community are obviously men as well. And so, you know, I like to just take the human approach. And I think, you know, as I said earlier, this isn't about man bashing, but I think we need to understand that, yes, there's a long way to go for women, but unless we do some of the work with men and other people in different communities, whether they be, you know, queer or culturally different communities, then we're really not going to make any real progress. So look, thank you again, Leanne, a wonderful talk and really challenging. So thank you and thank you. All right, so next we have up Naila Qazi. She's an experienced, energetic and elegant speaker who empowers her audience to change. She's educated and impacted audiences of more than 35,000 people across several industries and continents, Australia, North America and the Middle East. I call Naila a friend. We've known each other for a very long time. And she's the founder of Accelerate Consulting based in Canada. And through her flagship Horizons coaching program, she's transformed hundreds of entrepreneurs, employers and professionals by changing their mindset. She's helping her clients break through the fog to realise their true potential. And tonight she's speaking to us about breaking the bias. So welcome to the stage, Naila.
Thank you so much. Australia is always coming back home, but this is my third talk for an Australian platform. So that means I need to sleep after this. It's 6 a.m. almost. It's so nice to meet with you, Genene, and thank you so much for inviting me. Wonderful topics and great discussions. It's just coincidentally, I'm leading a diversity and inclusion project for one of the clients, and what Jody was, I was listening to her talk, like you got this job just being a woman, like we hear that every day from engineers. My daughter is doing her engineering degree, and like we're talking about these 22 years old kids, and like this time and era in Canada, and she still gets bullied by her boys in her class that you're too smart for an engineer or for a girl to be an engineer. So those subtle informal comments I hear from her, like when they address her, talk to her in school or university, and also at the same time the mining and construction project culture transformation we leading. So women who started working in construction 30 years ago, it's so funny when we're gathering their stories and they are talking to us, and the same language is still being used. So someone talked about language. Sarah, you talked about, yes, it's so important that we need to work on that. It should change. It has not changed, like how much work has been done in culture transformation. Like even my 20 years of work has been in culture transformation, but so disappointing and hurting to see that, like Sherry, my daughter, like Genene, she grew up, you saw her like a baby child, and she still experiences the same, that subtle bullyism which women in mining who I deal with every day, leaders, female, they face. So yeah, a lot of this work needs to be done. But the other piece which Leanne touched on is very important as well. So what we found, I've been working on this project of culture transformation, diversity and inclusion, Canada and UK, like that's the scope of impact of that project. to build a culture of diversity and inclusion, and especially women of color, and listening to the problems of women who took engineering as a profession, and they are underground. They work like miners and geologists. Like you could imagine that array of professions, highly male like dominated, and you have to run the big machinery as well, like smaller women and running those big trucks and all. So where we found it very successfully really impacting the culture change, it was not through the project plans or communications we did or stakeholder assessments we did all those things, but where actually it impacted when we found allies from within the organization, and those allies were all males. So we found it, we started calling them catalysts of change. We also call them influencers, like just to make different groupings at the senior level, mid-level, and frontline supervisor coordinator levels. Males who were very supportive of hiring women, respecting women, demonstrating through their daily routines in mining and construction that they can do the same work. They did not get this job because they are too smart to be an engineer. Like that's the language which is used often, but these guys really showed respect. So our list of those catalysts or male allies, as the list is growing, we see proportional success in our culture transformation. So I totally agree with what Leanne was saying, that we cannot do this work in isolation because the other party is being not as much discussed as women. And then I'd link it back to my own self, like my own story. I migrated to Australia like 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And I have migrated from underprivileged rural background, no support at all. But I had my dad always on my side. So he did not know how to, but he really wanted me to make something big, like not just follow the same path which other girls in my area would do, like get married, have kids at very early age. Although I did not keep up with that promise, not getting married for long, but for some, like, I think it was very much in my DNA. And I think that's where that self-belief piece comes in, that we really need to look at like what are the biases we have for our own selves. And that's the experience which those women in construction mining industry share as well, that what led to their success by not pretending to be a man, but pretending by being who they are, being women, being females, and really proving through their work and whatever achievements they have done through hard work, that they got this job not by being a female, but really a great contributor. So when I look back at my own journey, like 20 years outside of Pakistan, and coming literally with nothing, and coming to a new country as a young person, that was not the time when technology was so much available. And I started my career in Melbourne, went to Melbourne University, and then moved to Sydney, where Genene and I met. And throughout like this period, if I see that what has helped me to be successful, raise two kids and move continents and work in these global organizations, which I'm truly privileged to work in, my husband as my ally, like really bringing a man with me on my side. And it was not easy. In our culture, we have arranged marriage. We didn't know each other. And early on, I really have to go through a lot of being open and flexible, and also being ready to change as well, not just expect that things are done for me, but on the other hand, how far I have to go to make that accommodation. And that really worked in building that initial relationship and having him as my ally and supporting me in my career and supporting me in my education as well. We come to Canada, and it's the role shifted, like I became the main breadwinner at some time, but the respect and the bonding and the allyship did not change. So I still think that it would not have been possible for me without having him on my side and really supporting me and doing his piece, which I needed for my success and for kids' success as well. Earlier, we were talking about another group, we were talking about how women can break those barriers in the political arena because not enough representation of women in politics all over the world. And one of the stories was shared by Mariah Priestley from UK. She made a history like only Black woman who runs Southeast England, a UK seat. But and I was moderating her interview, and my question was that she felt a profile of her and the profile of those she makes decision on daily basis in a room is very different. Like generally white males 50 plus, and it's only Black women. So my question to her was like, what gives her that energy every day? Because it drains on you, like you are working and trying your best in an environment which is not that allyship environment, like it's very confrontational. And 3 things she said, and I think this really resonated with me and with my message to all women, and like based on my own history and where I have come from, be flexible. So her message was, and it really resonated, that if we really want to change and we want to break those biases and prejudices, and yes, people have preferences as well, but if we are flexible and we open up to all those flexibilities, which makes other kind of adjust, it really makes us to walk further where we really want to go. And the other piece of advice which Mariah had was be open and be vulnerable. And I could relate to that. I grew up in a culture which is very shame culture, like you are shamed for everything. And I wouldn't go further, like it can go to very bad extent in terms of shaming, especially for girls. It's a shame culture. So I think the third message for me was, she did not say in this way, but I thought, okay, go shameless, because if you really ashamed of yourself, of who you are, like how you look and how you feel and how you talk, and you will not bring the change, because change only comes when there is discomfort, when there's openness, when there's vulnerability, and you don't know. So really those unknowns, and that opens up the doors for that allyship. And I think that really leads to the next level for women and for society. Like they are the partners we have to work with. Yeah, that's the messages. I think it was a mix of emotions. It was emotional to hear to lots of these incredible women and very successful women, and really listening and being and sharing platform with all of these women, since I think this is my 3rd or 4th talk. I really need to drink lots of water, but lots of common messaging. And it looks like we're all moving ahead with the same kind of understanding. It's great. Actually, we are having those discussions. I'm surprised to see that companies are now, especially after COVID, spending money on D&I kind of culture creation, bringing diversity specialists in, bringing inclusion specialists in. It was not there before. I think past 10 years, I've been very busy with launching technology. And the past 2 years, I've been very busy launching diversity and inclusion and culture transformation to bring more women into workforce and really creating a culture for them where they feel supported and have allies. So there's a shift. I think COVID, that the positive side, what we are seeing now.
Thank you, Naila, so much. It's good to hear that we're seeing some change in the workforce and in the workplace, and that people and businesses are starting to reimagine women in the workforce or in being more inclusive. So that's a really important message. So thank you so much. Okay, Gary, I think you may have, were there any questions to talk about, or otherwise I will hand over to you to introduce Maureen.
Thank you. Jody has just said that Maureen's just not on the call right now, but it's thanks. Jody has said, thanks, Naila. 1 point share. We need men to be allies and champions of women's empowerment in the workplace. It's important to engage the men who are part of the team. Visionary men have long been public champions and behind the scenes decision or deal makers for the cause of women's inclusion. Today, we need more than ever. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I class myself as one of those men, Jody. Really passionately believe that too, and thank you for acknowledging that. Leanne says absolutely. So thank you so much, Naila. It was lovely meeting you, and I commend you on your commitment on International Women's Day, back to back talks, which I know a lot of ladies on here are doing. So thank you so much. I want to introduce the lovely Michelle Flowers, all the way from the US. Michelle is a lady that just exudes a lovely, vibrant spirit and energy, and I've got to know her quite well recently. She is a lady that is by profession a pharmacist, but by passion much more than that, and I'll let her tell you a bit about what she does. And welcome, my good friend. How are you?
Thank you, Gary. I am wonderful. So first of all, I want to thank you, Gary, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And Gary's right. I've been a pharmacist 28 years. Haven't liked it one day. Got a divorce, and now I'm a divorce coach, and I love it. Changing lives. So pain with a purpose. But I really wanted to let you guys know that I'm really honored and humbled to be amongst such dynamic and influential women. And, you know, when Gary first invited me to speak, I wanted to, well, first of all, I said yes, because it's Gary, but I wanted to learn more about, you know, International Women's Day and breaking the bias. So I went to the second to Google most popular place to get info, YouTube. So I was on YouTube, and I saw some very inspirational videos. I saw women reciting poetry, you know, speaking about the essence of being a woman, our resilience, our strength, our uniqueness, our beauty. And then I saw some women that were bringing awareness to breaking the bias. And Gary, you remember I reached out to you and I was like,
yeah.
I don't know if you really want me on the panel, because I'm getting kind of a different take on breaking the bias. And so here's what I was getting in my spirit. What can every woman do, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of race, regardless of the day, regardless of it being International Women's Day? What can every woman do to make an impact on breaking the bias? And, you know, what came in my spirit is we've got to break the bias within. Now, I want you to imagine successful woman wanting to be acknowledged and appreciated as a human being, but yet she's being judged for her strengths and her skills. And I wonder, you know, when this woman goes home and she looks in the mirror, she can't even appreciate herself. She's judging herself because she doesn't feel like she's enough. And then I started to think about the various isms. We've got discriminatory isms like racism and ageism. We've got isms that are advocating for causes, feminism, socialism. And I was thinking, when we're thinking about breaking the bias within, we have got to be sure that we don't allow the isms of the world to affect how we see ourselves and dictate the decisions we make. And so I thought the best way to send this message home was to kind of paint a picture for you guys. And this scenario has 4 hypothetical possible outcomes. But what I want you to do is I want you to picture a woman in a corporate setting. She's high up in the company, sharp dresser, got her heels on, you know, looking snazzy. And there's a position she wants to interview for. And it's only been held by men. They haven't ever hired a woman, okay? So scenario A, she's going to the interview, she's reaching for the door, and she stops and she says, they've never hired a woman before. Why would they start with me? And she walks away. Scenario B, woman goes to the interview, And they flat out say, we don't hire women. You can check the job posting down the hall and try for something else. She leaves the interview reaffirming that the bias is out there. And she says to herself, why did I even put myself out there? I'm not going to ever try for a position like that again. Scenario C. Goes to the interview, gets the job. But the rumor mill is she only got it because she's a woman. If she hadn't have been hired, she would have sued the company. And so instead of being celebratory for her achievements, she says to herself, I only got the position because I'm a woman. And then there's scenario D. Goes to the interview, doesn't get the job, but she goes home and she looks in the mirror and she says, you did your best. But what can you do better? And then she starts to reflect and say, I wonder, did I not get the job because they didn't like the color of my shoes? Did I not get the job because they didn't like the tone of my voice? Did I not get the job because maybe I wasn't qualified? Did I not get the job because I'm a woman? And then she says, I don't give a damn. It's their loss. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to keep on opening doors. If a door closed, I'm going to open the door, close door. I'm going to keep on moving forward. Now, I love acronyms, okay? So the word bias, this is what popped off for me. Before I am secluded, because ladies, we've got to be 100% and understand we are going to face bias, we're going to face prejudice, discrimination, and judgment. But we've got to be equipped. We've got to be able to reach in our toolbox and not allow the biases to stop us. And so when we look at those scenarios, scenario A, before I am secluded, I'm going to be sure that I always at least try. Scenario B, before I am secluded, I'm not going to allow the ignorance of someone else cause me to give up. Scenario C, before I am secluded, I'm not going to allow other people's perceptions dictate how I feel about myself. And scenario D, before I am secluded, I'm going to remember that I can't control everything that's going on around me, but I can control my response. And so on this International Women's Day, when we're talking about breaking the bias, I want everyone under the sound of my voice to be sure that you understand you have got to be equipped. You have got to be ready, because there are going to be prejudices. There are going to be biases. There are going to be judgments, but you have got to know you are enough. You have got to not allow those biases to keep you from going forth in your greatness. And so, before I am secluded, we all have got to remember we have an impact to make on this planet. Before I am secluded, we have to remember we must be true to ourselves. And before I am secluded, we've got to remember, no, we've got to know deep down in our core that we're unstoppable. Thank you.
Beautiful. Preach it. Yes, well done, well done, well done. I told you she's some vibe. Genene?
Yeah. So, oh, look, Michelle, that was amazing. So thank you. So together we'll forge positive visibility for women and start within ourselves. And we've got to know that we are enough and that we need to believe in ourselves and be an unstoppable force.
Yes, yes, yes. And yeah, Leanne says it's their loss to what you were talking about. Thought-provoking Michelle. Kellyanne says, yes, yes, yes. It's always their loss. What a dynamic speaker you are, Michelle. Leanne said, chills, so powerful, said Nicole. Whoa, Jody, I work in the world of acronyms and love your bias acronym, great storytelling and impact. Thank you, Michelle. Nicole says, where can we find this so we can post it everywhere? Powerhouse, says Amanda. So there you go. There you go. And Michelle had a bias with herself about speaking on this beforehand, and I'm going to actually say it out loud because I want to celebrate her courage and breakthrough and confidence in herself to actually unleash her powerful voice to the world. And you came on here and you did that, so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Well done.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well done.
Gary, who have you got up next? We've got some wonderful speakers yet to take the stage.
Yes, two. Maureen, I don't know if Maureen is going to be joining us. I'm hoping she does join late. But our next speaker is the lovely Rachel Rosenberg. Rachel has been part of my life now for quite some time, and we have shared wonderful talks, stories, voices, ideas with the world on various platforms. And this is just another one. This is just another day for us. This is what we do every damn day. And a very special day it is, an International Women's Day, to have you here, Rachel. Rachel hails from the States and is an entrepreneur and just a beautiful soul in person. So over to you, Rachel. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Fire away.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for I just loved and appreciated so many different insights and perspectives on so many different levels and contributors to all of the different biases. And Michelle, you really, really spoke to me. One of my favorite quotes that actually was inspired by the talk that Gary helped me do is, if you're still searching for that one person to change your life, take a look in the mirror. So thank you. It's like bringing up a lot of emotion. But I'm so honored and so grateful and so humbled to be here today. And I thank you, Gary, for being the man whose ego is not threatened by celebrating the successes of the women that you love.
Thank you.
Today, we share our powerful voices on behalf of all women, together breaking the bias. And my name is Rachel Rosenberg, and as Maya Angelou says, each time one of us stands up for ourselves without knowing it and possibly without claiming it, we stand up for all women and men. Now that I've heard some of your contributions and insights, as I said. But I want to ask you, how many of us have ever walked in a room and felt judgment before we utter a word? Now, how many of us have had to break down barriers just because we were female? How many of us have ever been apprehensive to walk down a street lined with catcalling boys or men? I remember as a young girl looking to find a different way to school many mornings, or on vacation venturing outside of the hotel only to run back into the lobby, afraid to be adventurous. I have always been judged by my bra size and my blonde hair and the dumb blonde perception of the past. I remember once hearing Dolly Parton say, I'm not offended by the dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb and I also know I'm not blonde. And crazy that that would be something I admired as a very young girl, how much she didn't care what people thought and their judgment. Add a brain injury 5 years ago, an invisible injury that has given me so many lessons and blessings, just being here today in spite of this, but also yet another reason for people to label me dumb. Now needing extra time to respond to questions due to processing issues, unable to recall something that was just discussed, word retrieval when I know exactly what I intend to say and the words don't come, and sometimes a long pause. As much as I focus, it's impossible for me to follow a group text or read or comprehend an email, has only reinforced condescending conversations with many, mostly men, but sometimes women too. Growing up, I felt the prejudgment, but I knew and believed in most instances that I overcame it once given an opportunity to speak. But what about when we aren't given an opportunity to speak? What about when we're judged just because we're female or simply because the way that we look? I had been dating someone for a while when his board members of his company, he being the CFO, invited us to join them for dinner. The couples, who were all married and obviously knew each other very well after their husbands had been running this company together for a good amount of time. We had cocktails, we had dinner, we had dessert, not a quick meal. Not one person, you guys, asked me one thing about myself, my family, my children, my career, nothing. I had never been so blatantly ignored by all of them, just as a human. The next day, the CEO asked my boyfriend to take a walk and asked my very serious boyfriend if he thinks that I'm smart enough for him. I have never been so angry, judging me without ever speaking to me, and even more so for my boyfriend not having the courage to challenge this behavior. Obviously, he's not my boyfriend anymore. So I worked in the finance world for many years. My background up to that point had been in art and fashion. The majority of the industry in the market that I was calling on was male. And as I watched these women come forward in recent years, I could fill a courtroom with the disrespect, sexual harassment, and sexual assault that I'd been subjected to beginning as a teen. I developed early, 11 years old to be exact. At 14, a freshman in high school, was dating seniors and had already experienced everything that we are coming together today in an effort to break the bias. I was so proud to have worked my way up from sales and financing to vice president of the company. I stayed in the industry well beyond the years I loved it, because although I didn't have the education behind me or the letters after my name, I had a title and I had a paycheck that many would not have imagined by looking at me. And just a few days ago, I read a quote by a very wise woman that said this: "There's humility in accepting the things that are not for us anymore. It takes a real quieting of the ego for you to hear the universe telling you that you are deserving of better energy." I finally left that job and career as I knew in my heart the only thing I wanted to really do was help people. And although I was walking away from something that finally made me feel proud and look smart with that title in the finance world, I knew what I had to offer was so much bigger than that. It's an empowering place to get to when you finally realize it's none of your business what other people think of you. If you've read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, it's an amazing book on personal freedom. It speaks to this. Easier said than done. How many of us have been gaslighted? I can remember so many things I held in, feelings, opinions, anger, hurt, fear, and so much more in an effort to avoid at all costs to be considered high maintenance or over emotional or crazy or overly sensitive. How many of us have ever been asked these questions? Are you crazy? Are you getting your period? Are you insane? You're so emotional. You're hysterical. You're so bitter, as if feelings were gender specific, and which often then leads you to imposter syndrome in all areas. Like what Michelle spoke to, questioning your own wisdom and knowledge, whether the source is books or life or a combination, which then leads to the most insulting and condescending conversations involving mansplaining. When on top of the prejudgment of the past, and now with this invisible injury, I have people, again, men, mostly, but not always, who then start talking very slowly to me, explaining the most obvious things as if I'm not following them, or speaking louder as if I can't hear. Or when someone says, let me ask you a rhetorical question, the one whose answer is so obvious, there's no need to say. There is not one country in the world that treats women as they do men. Feminism is not synonymous with hating men. We need more men. I love men. This is not about having choice. This is about having choices. This is about human rights. Feminism strives for the equality of sexes, not the superiority of women. But at the end of the day, every one of them acknowledges this is not a women's issue. This is about gender equality. This is about human rights. And feminists stand by all, women, trans, and more. A place where men invite the fresh perspective of women as opposed to being intimidated or feeling less if they acknowledge their insight. When I listen to men who call themselves feminists, because I too, Michelle, went on YouTube, and what was so encouraging was the kind of men, and I sent the interview, Gary, to you, straight men, Black, white, gay, famous, athletes, actors, activists, expressing courageously and vulnerably, hesitantly sometimes, however, coming forward regardless of the judgment of their fellow men, each with their own message related to stories and experiences. And as Tarana Burke said in her TED Talk, and she was the one who initiated the Me Too, we have to re-educate ourselves and our children to understand that power and privilege doesn't come always. That power and privilege doesn't always have to destroy and take, but to serve and build. We need to understand unequivocally that every human being has the right to walk through this life with their full humanity intact. Thank you.
Well done, and thank you for sharing that so vulnerably. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your authenticity and just showing up in this world. You know, that's all any of us can do, is show up our best selves and try and leave people and situations, you know, better than we found them. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate you, and I know I can speak on behalf of everybody else that we appreciate you. So thank you. Genene.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, thank you so much, Rachel. That was a really inspiring story. And you know, I could just, your vulnerability felt palpable as you were speaking. And, you know, I myself have been underestimated many, many times. And, you know, I wanted to congratulate you on your talk. And you know, we can all agree, I think, that we need to call out gendered actions and assumptions and, you know, underestimate me at your own peril. Holding in our feelings is unhealthy, and we need to all step fully into our humanity.
Definitely, definitely. And I just want to share with you all too that I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she is very into was very important to her. And just the fact that she is 22 years old and I'm 57, and she could relate on every single level to what, you know, I shared with all of you today. So that's definitely, I think, even more reason that we need to change the conversation.
Yeah,
and break the bias.
Yes.
Break the bias.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, listen, we have one more speaker. I have one friend that has been lost in translation somewhere, Maureen, in the States, but I'll be meeting her tomorrow, so we'll hook up. No doubt she's doing many other things anyway. But we have a lady that is a great supporter of mine and somebody I value very much, Amanda. With us, Amanda is a fabulously talented in the virtual world. Let her introduce herself and what she actually does. Too much for me to say. And Amanda's just a beautiful person as well. Really, really heart-centered person. Very much a servant mentality, and we're very like-minded. And this has been a real great pleasure for me today, personally, to be honest with you. I didn't want to say at the start to lower the tone, but I've actually had COVID for the second time in three months. I have it right now, and I'm not feeling fantastic, but I'm so glad that I'm on this call, because, you know, I think how we spend our time is so valuable, hence recognition of your self-worth and your self-image and what you should be given time to. And I really wanted to give time to this, and it's been a real joy. It's actually lifted me being on this call, so thank you. And every time you see my picture disappearing, it's because I'm taking a drink. So that's where I'm disappearing, not that I'm disappearing off somewhere. So thank you so much, everybody. And I want to introduce my good friend Amanda Hyde-Pierce, all the way from Northern Ireland.
Costa del Belfast.
Yes. Welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Wow, we have heard from incredible, inspiring women today. I feel honored to be here with you guys today, celebrating women on what is International Women's Day. Can I ask, actually, can I share my screen? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. So 1 second while I...
No problem at all.
1 second while I feel important to...
Oh, Gary.
You are important.
Yes, of course I am. Of course I am. I tell myself this every day. It's one of my affirmations.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, so can you see my made up self on the screen? They're fabulous.
What a beautiful profile picture.
Well, yes, lots of makeup and filters. So some words that have stood out to me today from listening to all you amazing people. Reevaluate, reimagine, reframe, refocus. And I want to add one more word to that. Realize. Realize that within yourself, maybe you do have biases, or others around you. Realize what you're soaking in. And there are all kinds of biases, as we've heard today, some with fancy names that may sound a bit fierce, you know, conscious bias, unconscious, cognitive, strange one called functional fixedness, confirmation, and one that I struggle with myself, self-perception bias. That's a big one for me. And many people listening now will have experienced all kinds of bias. We may not have always realized that that's what it is, or that's what it was, because bias is clever. Bias is sneaky. And I'm going to share a few things about me, experiences where bias has been put upon me by others or even by myself. And though I'm not going to red flag each moment of bias, what I want you guys to do is listen and to realize and see if you can hear that bias and see that bias as I tell my story. All right, so I do have notes at the side of me here, not as good as you guys. So let me share a little bit about me. I moved around a lot as a kid, from one unpleasant circumstance to another. I was an inconvenience. It was told to me a lot. I was an afterthought. I was someone used to satisfy the needs of the adults around me. In school, I was the quiet kid, the kid that looked disheveled, like she'd been dragged through the hedge backwards. The kid with off-white socks and the school uniform skirt that should have had perfect pleats. But oh my word, it was every shape. But why did I look so disheveled? Well, because even from the youngest school age, I had to look after myself. No one was around to do it for me, at least no one sober or competent. And I was never good at ironing pleats and skirts. But thankfully, not all of the 13 schools I went to had pleated school uniforms. Now, and honestly, after 40 years, my ironing skills are still terrible, probably why I'm divorced. And as an adult, I have never, hear me ladies, I have never, nor will I ever own a pleated skirt. No, they're of the devil. Done. Simple as. So I was the oldest of 3 children. Though my brother went to live with his nana, it was me and my little sis against the world. She is my heart and my soul. And see, mum would disappear for days on end. And you know, you're the oldest, me, I'm the oldest, you sort it, you'll be a mum one day. You need to learn, which was her way of saying, look, I've got my benefits. I'm away to party. I don't give a hoot. You look after your sister, you feed her, you iron her clothes, and my ironing skills, as we've said, and get her ready for school and get her out. Hide from the rent man. Hide from the loan man, hide from social services. Don't let anybody notice mum is not home. I'm the oldest, I needed to do this, it was expected. And at the time I believed it was my place. And as I said, we moved around a lot, obviously 13 schools. We lived in Manchester Council estates, even though I've got this accent, I'm not originally from here. We lived in Liverpool, we lived in London, a couple of homeless hotels. And the stigma always followed us. I was always the disheveled kid. And no matter where we moved to, no matter where we were, in no time at all, our mum would have this bad reputation of being a drunken, violent, horrible lady. And it came onto us. People judged us for her and the way she acted. And you know, as a child, the last thing you want to do is stand out. It's the worst thing. And I stood out in all the wrong ways. And as a child, I listened a lot, spoke very little, but I listened and I took it all in. And all these things, all these prejudice, all these bias that was said about my family, and actually maybe some of them were true, but it's not of me, but it stuck with me. I believed what was said of me at home by the adults that were supposed to be caring for me. I believed that was said at school. The unfair judgments, the unfair comments, the unfair assumptions, the unfair bias. As a child, I believed it and I took it all in. And I believed when I heard the teachers in their teacher's line one day, as I was leaving after sending a note in, the teacher said, she's a lost cause, that one. If she was a dog, we'd put her down.
No way.
Because we moved around a lot, I took each moment to move as a chance to reinvent myself. It was a positive thing for me. I would distance myself. No friends ever came round to the house. No one would ever know. I would endeavor to get much better at my ironing skills so my school uniform would be better. And my own self-perception was just awful. I worked hard to overcome. I worked hard to learn as I grew up. As a child, what happened to me and my sister was not as a result of our decisions, but as a result of those who had legal authority to make our decisions for us. I worked hard to learn that despite the biases, despite the judgments, I am lovable. I am loved. And I'm a nice person. And if by chance I'm not being a nice person on any given day, just give me chocolate. I will be fine. All will be good. But like each one of us here presenting, I'm a work in progress. I'm thankful for that. I'm not the person I was 30 years ago with the same insecurities, the same hang-ups. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. And you know what, if I'm blessed with a few more decades, then I hope that when those time comes, I'll look back and say, I'm not the person I was back then. And having left home at 16 before I created my own business, I worked in, I'm going to jump across the slides. Sorry. I worked in corporate for 20 odd years. I worked hard to reinvent myself and distance myself from being my mother's daughter and from being treated as if I was like her. And one of my most recent jobs before I started my own businesses is I managed teams, and it's spread across the UK, and it wasn't as virtual as it is now. I mean, come on, you know, we have it easy here. Turn the computer on, be Zoom ready from here up and wear the fluffy slippers. Come on, I'm wearing the fluffy slippers now. You know, so we have it easy, folks. But me, then, no, it was weekly trips on the Vomit Comet around the UK. When you're traveling nationally, it's just these little planes. So I literally got on a plane to visit my teams, whether that be Manchester or Glasgow. That's the way we did it old school. And I was pretty good at my job. I managed the operations for a massive company. I had fantastic relationships with the senior bigwigs. I had started off as a PA and no one knew my history. I was just Amanda. I was allowed to be me, no judgments, or so I thought. I thought I'd proved myself many times over, but one small throwaway statement changed it all, and it shattered the glass of the person I thought I had proved myself to be, because it showed me once again that in my life I was perceived unfairly as someone that I wasn't. And you know what? I don't even remember the question. I don't. I do remember what followed. In an open plan office, can I do this? Hang on. In an open plan office, one of the financial officers, financial people, called across the office this question to somebody else on the other side: do you know the answer to whatever it was? And he replied back, no, sorry, don't know. Somebody else chirped up, maybe it's this. Somebody else chirped up, maybe it's that. All men, by the way. Somebody else chirped up, maybe it's that. And I chirped up because I actually did know the answer. And remember, again, it's an open plan office. The response back to me with a hand was, don't be silly, Amanda. What would a PA know? I'm losing all my slides. Sorry, excuse me. In that moment, I felt so small. In that moment, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many moments, days, weeks, months, years passed, no matter how many hours I spent away from my family, I was seen as a PA. And by the way, I was a PA for a lot of years. We are fantastic people. We work hard. We work hard at a very thankless job sometimes. And PA, I don't know how some of the people I work for manage to tie their laces in the morning without our help. PAs are amazing. My issue was not that I was referred to as a PA. My issue was the way they saw me. Bear with me 1 wee second. I'm getting a bit emotional, sorry. My issue was the way they saw me. In their mind, they had placed me in a box, and that box allowed me no growth, no valuable opinion, no thought, no voice outside of that box. I was my past. And fast forward a little bit later, to me and hubby, we'd parted ways, as life is such as life, and I had to find another way of making money. We had a nice home that was dependent on 2 incomes, bills that needed 2 incomes to pay them. And I found myself in a place where he had moved on, and that's wonderful. And I had to find extra money to pay the bills. And I started working a little side hustle as a VA, getting extra money on the side, helping people with admin tasks. But just 3 months into that, I don't know how I did it, but I was able to replace my full-time income and go out into business on my own. I was so proud of myself, like an actual grown-up. I had taxes, I had insurances, I had branding. Look at me being an adult. And it was amazing. I was proving to myself that I could do all of this. And probably a lot of that was because all my life I've been told I couldn't, I wasn't worthy of anything. I was a lost cause. If I was a dog, I would have been put down. A local person reached out to me, a local Belfast person reached out to me one day. He had a few bits and bobs of one-off work that he wanted to do that I was taking off the plate, take off his plate. And there was coffee and where are you going? There was coffee and cake on order. Where are you going? Never mind, let's get rid of that. It's been a pain in the bum. There was coffee and cake on order anyway. So do you know what? These chins need cake. They never refuse cake. So I was there and we sat and we chatted. Oh my goodness. He told me all about his family, all about his business, and it was going great until it wasn't. He put his head down in his hands and it just went very quiet. And when he raised his head again, he had tears in his eyes. He said, I feel so stupid. I should be able to do this on my own. This was a businessman. He has still very much in contact with him. He has his own mechanical car mechanic place and very successful. He and his husband look after a young family. They both work full time, but he was coming home every day and trying to do the paperwork and all this kind of stuff. And he was just so frustrated, so tired, and he felt like a failure. So I said to him, if I was, do you think I should be able to look into my engine of my car and diagnose what the fault is? And he was, why would you? Why would you? He says, I've been working years at this. You know, no, of course not. Okay, so what if I was to try and, if I was to tell you I cannot change a tire? I cannot change a tire. And he said, okay, that's all right. He says, you'd be surprised how many people cannot change a tire. And so I said to him, right back at you, right back at you. Some people can do all of these wonderful things, all these paperwork things, these bookkeeping, this admin, this outreach, this social media engagement. There's lots of people who can do these things. Yes, there's lots of people who can't. And judging by the personal expectation you have put upon yourself, I believe you'd be surprised at how many people can't do that and put pressure on themselves to do that. So I'll tell you why I tell this story. I'm fortunate enough in my business that I have a team of associates, virtual assistants, OBMs, online business managers like myself, copywriters, website designers, web course creators. There's lots of us all causing havoc around the world. And most recently, I started to mentor UK VAs. And it used to surprise me, but not so much, that the conversation when we first start off, a phrase often comes up like this: but I'm just a VA, but I'm just a woman, but I'm just young. Or when they're talking about interviewing, pitching for new business, but they're real business people. Why would they take me seriously? I'm a woman. Or I'm just a VA. And it's so common for these people to feel like they have no voice. They're just the little woman or, you know, the little office person. And each time I feel two things. Each time I feel sad. I feel sad for them because they feel they are just this or just that, and that they're comparing themselves to other people. That's unfair. That's a bias they put on themselves. And I feel that so many of them have a similar experience to what I had, being put in that little box, my voice not being allowed to be heard. What would you know? You're just a PA. They've been shown that their job is important and valuable. So when this happens, I tell them the story of the mechanic, not to embarrass him, not to shame him, but to show them They have value, they have a place, whether they're women, whether they're office workers, they have a place in this world, they are valued. And I said I have two things that I feel. I also feel joy. When they shared this with me, I feel joy. I feel joy that I, this little quiet girl with messed up pleats in her skirt, trying to escape the reputation and the bias that followed my family about, that UK team manager busting her chops to feel like she had value, that was put in the box and silenced, gets to say to these beautiful people, you are amazing, you are talented, you are awesome. And I get to do that as part of my job. Here today, we're women and men listening in as well. And are we, Gary? We watch, everybody here, we watch, we learn, we absorb the good and the bad to unlearn the wrongs, the untruths that were put upon us by others, by the way we were treated, by the words that were spoken to us. It's hard. And I'm a work in progress. And whatever your experiences are in this life, we're all a work in progress. Whatever your role in life, your contribution to this world, from the kid trying to iron her uniform to the office person sitting in the corner, hoping somebody will notice them. You are amazing. You are spectacular. And yes, there are people out there that for whatever reason will have bias, an unfair view of you. And on this International Women's Day, we've all felt it at some point, be that as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, as a business owner. Don't take somebody else's bias upon your shoulders. Go out. You tell your story. And one of the things I think it come up when Michelle was talking, we cannot control the outside narrative. So I'm looking at my notes, but we can educate, and we can educate those outside of us to reevaluate, reimagine, reframe, refocus, realize. And as Michelle said, we can control our response. Ladies, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this time with you. Happy Women's International Day, guys.
Guys,
And incredible, amazing. I've been looking at a stream of comments coming up, and it's just what a wonderful talk. You know, as you were speaking, I wasn't saddened by what you were saying, but I think I felt like I'd experienced some of that myself. And, you know, it really struck a chord with me. And I think the thing is that there's plenty of takedown artists in this world. We're here to break the bias, and we have to start with ourselves. I'm going to say it again. We have to start with ourselves. Don't be your own worst enemy. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Beautiful. Some of the comments coming in. Kellyanne says, Amanda, you have such an incredible story, and there's always a purpose to our pain. This talk is part of that. Beautiful. But I am just such a lie we buy into. So good, so good, Amanda, says Kellyanne. Michelle Scheibner says, our identity is so much more than our story, Amanda. Genene, self-talk is very important. You just aren't anything. You are everything. Jody says, Amanda, we are all works in progress. I too was a PA for 16 years, and ironically, PAs usually run the business, not the manager. True story. And you're valued, and I appreciate you and your story. Thank you so much for that, Jody. Leanne, another powerful talk. My goodness, amazing. Michelle, flowers, beautiful. We're loving it. Love your story. What a talk. Thank you for sharing your story, Amanda, says Nicole, one of the attendees. And finally, thank you. I appreciate you. You know this. And I appreciate everybody on this screen. I appreciate all women around the world. I appreciate everybody that is striving and driving to be better, to do more, to be the best versions of themselves when their purpose is greater than self. That's people that I'm naturally drawn to as a person, and everybody on this screen is obviously shares that value, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for including me, or letting me be included in your journeys. not only on this call, but in the individual pieces of work that I've done together with most people, and still yet to do with others, I'm sure. And Genene, thank you. Thank you for your friendship and your collaboration, and I appreciate you, and I just want to say that publicly as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Gary. And it's just been an important conversation today. And wow, we had some incredible speakers, and I think it's just come together beautifully. The key message, obviously, break the bias within, break the bias outside of ourselves. Really call out gendered conversations, and even culturally sensitive. I know that if anyone's seen my recent TED talk about casual bullying, call out casual bullying for what it is, call out racism. Casual racism is so common. I think there's a perception that it's fun and funny, but from my own personal experience, it's generally not. And it's not about how you feel about saying it, it's about how the person receives that message. And so today was brought to you by Gary Doherty of Think Network and myself, Genene Wilson of Finesse Financial Advisors. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your attendance today. And together we can break the bias.
Yes. Finally, before we go, everybody, Genene is looking after the splicing and dicing of the video to send you your assets so that you can do as you please, or have a link in your portfolio of amazing talks. So thank you, everybody. Take care, and let's just stay connected. Let's make sure we connect with each other.
Yeah, and Genene and Gary, thank you so much for creating this platform for us and trusting us to communicate our messages. You're amazing, both of you.